One homeowner turned a real estate scam into a slow-motion marriage destroyer, and the agent never saw it coming. 7 years ago, I bought my first home. That sentence still feels surreal to say out loud. At the time, it felt impossible. I'd spent nearly a decade grinding through double shifts, skipped holidays, cheap furniture, instant noodles, and every soul-sucking financial sacrifice people romanticize once you've made it. I wasn't born into money, didn't have parents helping with deposits, and definitely didn't have a partner to split the burden with. It was just me, my paycheck, and a terrifying mortgage calculator that kept reminding me exactly how fragile my plans were. Still, after 10 years of clawing my way towards stability, I finally had enough. Not enough for a dream home, obviously. More like enough for a compromise. Where I live, fully detached freehold homes are expensive. Obscenely expensive. But there are smaller properties on shared blocks that can be affordable if you're willing to accept certain conditions. Most of them are strata title properties, which basically means you technically own your unit, but there are communal rules, shared responsibilities, committee meetings, restrictions on renovations, and 1,000 little ways your neighbors can involve themselves in your life. I hated the idea immediately. I'm a deeply private person. Introverted to the point where I once pretended not to hear my own doorbell because I didn't have the emotional energy to speak to a delivery driver. The thought of committees, bylaws, shared decisions, and Karen from Unit 3 telling me what kind of plants I could have near my mailbox sounded like a personalized version of hell. So I searched carefully. And eventually I found it. A small property on a shared block, but freehold title. Technically connected, legally independent. No strata committee, no bylaws, no communal politics. Just a shared walkway with a jointly funded insurance arrangement. That was it. Perfect. The listing explicitly said freehold title. The real estate agent confirmed it verbally. My lawyer exchanged emails with the agent confirming it. Everything aligned. Everything checked out. I bought it. And for 5 glorious months, I was happy. Then came the knock on the door. It was my neighboring owner, technically my attached neighbor, asking if we could discuss insurance renewals. I assumed he meant the shared walkway liability policy, which was standard. No problem. I asked him to send me a copy of the paperwork for my records. He did. And sitting there in black and white was the phrase, Strata Insurance Policy. I remember staring at it for a solid minute, thinking I must have misunderstood something. Maybe they just used a standard form. Maybe it was terminology overlap. Maybe I was being stupid. So I called my lawyer. Silence. Then confusion. Then a lot of swearing. Turns out the property was absolutely undeniably strata title. Not freehold, not sort of freehold. Full strata. My lawyer was horrified. To his credit, he genuinely had been misled too. He dug back through the correspondence and found multiple emails from the agent explicitly describing the property as freehold. The advertising material said freehold. The listing said freehold. Every piece of communication said freehold, except reality. Reality said otherwise. Legally, there were avenues available to me. My lawyer admitted fault on some procedural aspects and worked to make things right where he could, but the real issue was the real estate agent who had either lied outright or was catastrophically incompetent. Neither option impressed me, so I arranged a meeting with him. I came prepared, printed advertisements, emails, documentation, notes, every piece of evidence laid out neatly in front of him like I was prosecuting a murder case. He barely looked at any of it. Instead, he did what arrogant people do when they realize they're cornered. He denied everything with absolute confidence. He shrugged, said there must have been miscommunication, suggested I'd misunderstood. At one point, he actually implied the distinction between freehold and strata wasn't that significant. That nearly made me levitate out of my chair. I wasn't demanding a payout. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't threatening lawsuits. I just wanted acknowledgement and a reasonable resolution. Eventually, we entered mediation. Do you know what I asked for? Not compensation, not damages, not emotional distress. I asked that when the time eventually came for me to sell the property, his agency would either handle the sale free of charge or cover the associated costs. That was it. A future inconvenience fee, a professional courtesy. The mediator actually told him it was an extremely reasonable request. He refused immediately, flat out refused. Instead, they offered me $1,000 to put the matter behind us. $1,000. After being misled into purchasing a property under false pretenses, I declined. The mediator later privately suggested I pursue legal action because, in her opinion, I'd probably win. But at the time, my health wasn't great. Stress hit me hard, and the idea of dragging myself through months, maybe years, of legal proceedings sounded exhausting. Expensive too. Even if I won, I'd lose time, peace, and probably several functioning organs from stress. So eventually I let it go, at least externally. Internally, absolutely not. I became patient. Patient in the way glaciers are patient. The kind of patient where, like, resentment doesn't burn hot anymore. It settles cold and dense at the bottom of you like a black lake. And one day, while scrolling through social media, inspiration arrived. The real estate agent's Facebook profile was public. Not fully public, but public enough. Photos of nights out, barbecues, family events, golf trips. The carefully curated life of a middle-aged man who thought he was smarter than everyone around him. Then I saw an album titled Boys on Tour. It was from a trip overseas he'd taken a few months before I bought my property, and suddenly my brain produced the worst idea I've ever had. I found his home address through a business registration search. Then I waited. Exactly 1 year after the sale of my house, I sent flowers to his home. Nothing extravagant, tasteful, elegant, ambiguous. Attached was a small card that read, "Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day. She has your eyes. Love, Elle." That was it. No explanation, no contact information, just enough information to detonate quietly inside a marriage. And then I did absolutely nothing for an entire year. Then I did it again. Different flowers this time, different handwriting, same message structure. Our special day. Love, Elle. Sometimes a vague implication about a child, sometimes something wistful, sometimes almost romantic. Never explicit enough to prove anything, never threatening, just unsettling. Over the years, I escalated carefully. A postcard mailed internationally from the country he'd visited on his boys' trip. A letter with no return address. A birthday card one year that simply said, "I still think about that hotel." Always signed, "Love, Elle." The key was consistency. Once a year, always the same date, always calm, always deliberate. I never overplayed it, never became dramatic, never demanded money, never threatened exposure. I simply existed like a ghost from a mistake he desperately wanted buried. And honestly, after the second or third year, I assumed his wife had figured it out and they'd either dealt with it or laughed it off. Then 3 weeks ago, I heard what happened. Through the beautiful gossip pipeline of mutual acquaintances and friend of a friend conversations, I learned the real estate agent had divorced recently. Messy divorce too. Lost the house. Lost a huge chunk of retirement savings. Apparently his business collapsed shortly afterward and he's no longer even working in real estate. Naturally, I became curious. The story, according to people who knew them, was that his wife had spent years being disturbed by these strange annual gifts. He always denied knowing anything about them, said it was probably a prank, claimed someone was messing with him. But eventually she connected the dots. Same date every year, always emotional, always intimate. And eventually she confronted him hard enough that he admitted he cheated on her during that overseas boys' trip. Now here's the part I didn't know. Apparently when he came back from that trip, he had an STD, and he gave it to his wife. But somehow, through either manipulation, lies, or sheer audacity, he convinced her at the time that it wasn't from cheating. Which means my annual Our Special Day reminders unintentionally landed on the exact time frame of a real affair, an actual affair, with actual consequences. I didn't fabricate a cheating scandal, I accidentally excavated one. To this day, I still don't know whether to feel guilty or impressed. Because yes, objectively speaking, I helped destroy this man's life. But also, he did cheat, he did lie, he did manipulate his wife, and he did knowingly screw me over during one of the biggest purchases of my life without a shred of accountability or remorse. All I really did was refuse to let him forget that actions have a receipt date. So sometimes I feel bad. Then I remember sitting across from him while he smirked at me and implied I was too stupid to understand my own property contract. And honestly, that feeling passes pretty quickly. Turns out the universe keeps score. So why was this one so satisfying? Here's why this revenge worked so perfectly. Strategically, the original poster played the longest possible game, waiting 7 full years until every piece was perfectly in place. He used the agent's own secrecy and personal life against him in the most poetic way possible, turning a simple lie about a property title into the complete destruction of the man's marriage career and financial security. Psychologically, the guy never saw it coming because the messages were so vague and consistent that his wife filled in all the blanks herself. The timing lined up perfectly with his actual cheating and the STD incident from the year before. Legally, everything stayed completely clean, with no confrontation, no risk, and no illegal actions whatsoever, just anonymous flowers and postcards delivered at the perfect time. This is textbook ProRevenge. Incredibly patient, creative, highly calculated, and absolutely devastating in its quiet execution. Whew. All right, guys. Thank you for listening to this crazy revenge story. If you have one of your own, drop it in the comments below. I do my best to narrate all of your stories. If you want more satisfying karma stories delivered every week, please subscribe and turn on notifications. It really helps me out to keep posting this content and getting these videos out. Thanks again, everyone. Reddit revenge will be delivered.